we've been doing brief darses in previous weeks about Hadith, and I've been looking at Hadith as a technical subject, and I'll continue to do that. But I think last week I slightly digressed because in doing research on Hadith, I came across something that I don't think has ever been noticed, or if it's been noticed, it's been mentioned previously. And I'll mention it briefly now again. And that is that before Hadith as a subject came into being, the history of the world was written as a kind of mythological eulogy of the kings and rulers. If you read Mahabharata, that is supposed to be the history of a particular time in India, or if you read the old stories of Greece and Rome and so on, you find fantastic tales about the kings and how they were gods. You would know that Caesars were all supposed to be gods, and temples were made and dedicated to them and so on, and after they died, supernatural feet were associated with them, etc. And as I mentioned to you, it occurred to me that the compilers of the Hadith were the first people to say, let us look at things objectively. This person is saying that the Holy Prophet performed a certain deed, did a certain act, or said something. Who told him? Let's go to that person and ask him, did you tell him that? Was it exactly this? How do you know? Who told you? Oh well, that person told me. Go and ask him. Did the Holy Prophet say this? What were his exact words? What was the exact deed? What was the context of that deed? Okay? So you have affirmed that you told this person who passed us on to you, but who told you? And the man would say, a companion of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and then the Holy Prophet Muhammad himself, and so on. So they established a complete chain of narrators. This was never done previously. A historian would go to someone and say, I understand you are telling people that Hercules performed a certain deed. Is that so? And the man would say yes. And this person would never check whether the man who's spreading this tale, whether the man who's saying these things, that Hercules killed this dragon or defeated this god, whether that was true or not, or whether he had just made it up. So compilers of Hadith were the first people who did that. We know that a lot of that mythology that I referred to earlier on was actually history, because what happened was that about 150 years ago there was an American businessman, and when he became old and decrepit, a bit like me, he gave up his work, his business. He sold off his factory, and he had this idea in his head that these stories by the Romans and the Greeks and so on, which everyone thought were just stories, he thought there was some truth in those stories. So what he did was, there was a famous poem by a poet, it was called The poet was called Homer. And he said, okay, let me take this poem. And this poem says that this battle took place, and he describes the place, that there were hills around it and this and that and so on. So he said, let me try and find that place. And he went, and using the signs in Homer's poem, he said, it seems to me that the town or the city he's talking about must be located at this point in Greece. Because he was a rich man, he was an industrialist, he started a dig, and they found the town. So he then said, oh, that's interesting, so my theory is correct, that Homer's poem is not just mythology, there is some truth in it. So he then read it again, and then he went to another place. He said, the signs given by Homer in his poem, they seem to be linked to this place. So he started another dig, and there was another town, and so on. It proved that although a lot of what Homer wrote was simply to eulogize the kings and the people who'd gone before him, but a lot of it was true. And if you look into the books, I mentioned Mahabharata, but if you look into the other books and so on, you find exactly the same thing. And that was exactly what started these searches and digs, which are related to the Old Testament and New Testament as well. But the compilers of the Hadith were the first people who did not rely on these stories being told by anyone else, who tried to trace the whole thing back to the source. So they are the people who established the principles of modern historical and I would say even archaeological research. They had other principles. Does this satisfy common sense? No, this doesn't. I mean, now someone says there's a hadith that everyone must drink every day until they fall down dead drunk. Now you're going to say, well, that's against the Quran, the Holy Prophet can't have said that. So that was another principle that they established. If there is a hadith and its message is patently against the Holy Quran, you mustn't accept that. But the Holy Quran wasn't the only thing. They said, if it doesn't appeal to your common sense, it can't be true. If it's against the laws of nature, it can't be true. So they were trying to clear up all this mythology, but in doing so, perhaps unknowingly, I mean, their aim and objective was to preserve the sayings and the deeds of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in their purest form, to get as close to what he said or did as possible. But in doing so, they set up the foundations of modern historical and archaeological reason. Historians today, if I said, Buddha told me this, they wouldn't believe that. They'll say, okay, can you get someone to confirm that? Who else was there? Is there documentary evidence there? Have you got a pen or something that Buddha gave you to prove that you actually met him? I mean, picked a name out of the air as an example. So there is more to Hadith and knowledge of Hadith than meets the eye. And we really should take the trouble to look not only at the Hadith as what the Holy Prophet said, but how this system developed, and we'll see how much other branches of knowledge gained from what the compilers of Hadith did. Thank you very much.